We're about to start the event here. We have Suhas, Uliyar. I totally butchered his name before, so my apologies. We're going to get started in a couple minutes here, but we also have Think Space. Plug!
Yeah!
Plug! Give me your plug.
Oh, it's a long plug. You're going to have to wait till you see it.
Okay. Do you want to get started? Because I think...
Yeah, put it in there.
So, before we get started, I just want to introduce Beth from Think Space. They've been very gracious to allow us to utilize this space here tonight. So she's going to give us a couple notes on Think Space and how rad they are, so without further ado.
Thanks, Chad. I almost feel like, can you hear me better this way?
Yeah.
Versus this way? This doesn't even do anything. Sorry about that. I'll let you kind of go. Anyway, thank you so much for coming in. We just opened our space on March 1st, so you're kind of helping us break in the space, and we really appreciate having you all here. So Think Space, who we are, we house and support over 600 small businesses and startups, and we provide them with a network and community to grow their businesses. And we focus on building the best entrepreneur. So what makes us different is we support our community, and we focus on tech acceleration, and we staff our community with expert residents, advisors, and sorry, and we just basically focus on the bleeding edge technology. So it's super awesome to have Amnis here with your AI event, the Bots AI. We're super excited. We're super supportive of all of that. And as you can see, we have some really gorgeous meeting rooms and event spaces. We have offices for rent and also some co-working. So for this event, we would love to extend an offer for you guys to come in for 1 free day trial co-working. And you can pick up one of our business cards anywhere. And also you can do 20% off a meeting space. So if anybody needs a meeting space for any time, we'd love to have you guys in here. And so thank you again for coming in and helping us break this in. And thank you, Amnis.
Thank you. Cool, thank you, Think Space again. And I also want to extend that thanks to all you guys coming out here. So back in November 2017, no chatbot meetup. We searched and searched because we were developing chatbots of our own, and we're just like, how can we find people to talk to? So we ended up just saying, screw it, we'll start our own meetup here. And it's been really great the last couple events. We had Lily Chang from Microsoft, VP of AI Research, come out. And today we're very privileged to have Suhas Uliyar, the VP of AI Bots and Mobile Product Management, to talk a little bit about their platform and some of the things to come. So without further ado.
I think I'll do what Beth did. You guys can hear me in the back, right? Ryan, you can hear me? Good, perfect. My wife did say I have a very loud voice. So first of all, Chad, Richard, Beth, thank you. What a wonderful place, isn't it? So if you guys are looking out and not looking here, I can understand why. I would be doing the same thing. So it's, for me, first of all, it's thank you for being here late in the evening and giving me an opportunity to talk about where chatbots are, where they're going, and what Oracle's doing here. I travel quite a bit, so I live in the Woodinville area, but I've never been to a meetup in Seattle. This is my 35th or 36th meetup worldwide, but I'm so glad I can do it at home. So thank you guys for the opportunity. So I work for Oracle, and as my kids say, Dad, it's your grandfather's company, isn't it? So what comes to mind when you think of Oracle? Databases. There you go, right? We are that big database company. Actually, we're not quite that. So what are we now, right? So Larry Ellison, who's still our CTO and our chairman, and pretty much runs the technology for Oracle, his best friend used to be a gentleman called Steve Jobs. And he said that Oracle needs to model itself after Apple, for good or bad, but needs to model after Apple in that it's a full stack, right? What makes Apple really good is the hardware and software and applications, everything in one, and giving it the best sort of user experience, right? And that's what Oracle's all about, from what's called the software application layer, which is all the applications that people run, to the platform as a service, to infrastructure as a service that can run on-premise or off-premise. I work for the Oracle Cloud Platform team that is really focused at developers, IT focused really, as the platform. And we pretty much do everything you need to do to build your applications. And again, on-premise or in the cloud. I'm going to do this very quickly. This is not meant to be an advertisement for Oracle, but I just wanted to break the myth that we're not a database company or just a database company. We still have databases. It does very well, but no, we do a lot more. And the fact that this is a new Oracle in that we do embrace a lot of open source technology. So we do have databases like Cassandra and MongoDB apart from the Oracle database. We do a lot of work in Hadoop, Spark, Kafka, Node.js, etc. And we also contribute a ton to open source as well. So some facts and things that people usually don't quite know about. On top of that, Oracle is forever innovating, and I'm really glad that I'm part of Oracle's innovation team. After Mr. Jobs passing away, Larry Ellison's new best friend is a gentleman called Elon Musk. So everything at Oracle has to be autonomous. Starting with that, we have the autonomous cloud, which is a self-driving cloud, like the self-driving Tesla. And the idea is that whatever we do, and this comes directly from Larry, whatever we do, things have to be repaired by itself, scaled by itself, and has to have the smarts in it, so the AI. So while we sell AI, we internally consume AI for our services to self-learn about how people are using it, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But where I focus a lot is around conversational AI and artificial intelligence. We keep that two separate because AI is also, we have a pipeline of algorithms that you can use to build your own AI models. We are applied AI in that we use those models to build conversational AI. And of course, IoT and blockchain. So you can think of pretty much any of the new cool stuff that's going on, we do something about it. Those are all great, but the question really is, who uses your stuff, right? So for those bike junkies around here, I really can't see myself spending that kind of money for this, but you know, so as you can see. But Trek uses, so for you know, these bikes are pretty expensive, and when they take it to a dealer, they want to make sure that the claims are processed fast and they have visibility. So they build their entire 10,000 plus global dealers using our mobile platform for building apps. Exelon, pretty much to keep the lights on, they use our multi-channel experience, which is what I'm going to talk a lot about. So they build mobile apps, bots, and I'm looking at mixed reality in terms of augmented and virtual reality to build applications. I'm going to go through this very quickly. I don't want to bore you with a lot of this. StubHub that uses a lot of our analytics to really determine who's going to buy the tickets, how to change pricing, dynamic pricing, and the likes. I can't name this company. It's a very big company that does manufactures nuts and bolts. And for them, it's very critical because as this example of blockchain, where things get moved around, you make sure that when they go to customs, they can say exactly where things came from. So having ledger control. Carbon 3D, one of the best, coolest company to do printing. They've sort of really made it simple to make shoes and stuff. So they use all our stuff behind that. But one of my favorites is this one, the project, which is to get the fastest car in the world, 1,000 miles an hour. They use every part of my technology, so I really love them. No, but they do something really cool. So these guys are trying to set the 1,000-mile, world record, and they have amazing technology. Every little thing from IoT to sensors, you can imagine this, right? But what they do is everything they learn, they actually go and do. They teach that. They take that package to schools and colleges and teach kids. So it's becomes part of the curriculum in STEM and for women in technology. So they really sort of take all of this, and it's really a charity organization that takes all of this, builds the material, and brings us out to the rest of the world. So that's one of the reasons why this is one of my favorites. So that's pretty much the end of the Oracle, not your grandfather's database company. We do some really cool stuff, right? So what's going on in the world? So I wanted to start with a little video. I personalize, and to be honest, looking at the pace at which technology is moving, I look at my kids and they inspire me. I have two kids, one 16, both are teenagers, so they tend not to talk to me. It's more communication. But my entire career, I've sort of seen how they operate, what do they do on their mobile devices, what's on their mobile devices. And so I tend to sort of look at what's going on in the world. And I came across this video that I wanted to share with you. So it's a 2-minute quick video.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Publisher?
Not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter, you know the big ones.
I'm surprised you didn't say Facebook.
That's for old people, like my parents. That's funny.
Well, Amy, when you're working for me, you have to have those kind of research skills because I'll send you things for you to comb through and get the answers and send them to me. So for that, you got to be really good at technology.
For stuff like that, no problem. I'll just ask Siri.
You'll just ask Siri?
You know, Siri tell me this, Siri find me that. We're all good at getting you the answers.
Tell Siri, I want you ready to go at 8 sharp each and every morning.
I don't understand
What don't you understand?
what you just said.
You don't understand. Be ready to go?
No. You said 8, right?
Yes.
8 like in the morning? 8?
Yes, in the morning.
Yeah. That kind of doesn't work for me. Who gets up at 8?
I do.
I Skype with my French boyfriend in Paris until like 3 in the morning. I don't even get to Starbucks until like 10, where I order my grande chai tea latte, 3 pumps, skim milk, light water, 2% foam, extra hot but not too hot. So if it's okay, I work best in the morning at 10:45.
Wow. Amy, I don't think we're going to be a good fit.
Why are you so negative?
Okay, so actually, before I go to this, right, so I'll keep this slide and talk a little bit about that. So it's actually not too far from the truth. Actually, I played that video for my kids. You know what the first response was? Who uses Skype? What is Skype? That was the ultimate answer. It was like, who uses Skype, Dad? And I was like, so what would you use? I mean, by the way, has anyone here heard of House Party? Yeah, right, that's what I told you, right? So the other day I came home, and so this is how my 14-year-old works. So when the rare occasion that I'm at home, she comes in at 3:30 from the school, drops her bag, goes, Google, hey Google, start the TV and move to this channel. Okay, so she doesn't have the patience to even go find the remote control, which they have lost, by the way, right? So Google Home does everything. And then she realizes I'm at home, she says, oh Google, hey Google, remind me to do my homework in 2 hours. That's the mentality, right? And so when you look at that video, right, and I interview a few candidates that come out of Stanford and the likes, and then, you know what's very interesting, the response, the question I get asked is like, I say, do you have any questions for me? How many hours do I need to work? I'm like, okay, well, technically it's sort of an 8 to 4 job or 9 to 5 job, you know, on the technical side, but no, I'm asking like, do I have to come to work every day of the week? Well, no, you can work from home. No, that's not what I meant. Can I just work 3 days a week and take 2 days off? So I said, you mean like you want a 4-day weekend and work for 3 days? Sorry, not gonna happen here. And then I work 7 days a week even after all this year, right? But that's sort of what is happening in the industry, right? We are getting to a point where it's no longer that we're gonna go and actually search for data. We want data to be given to us. We want to be able to talk to data, right? Another experiment I did at home, I put my Mac, my iPad, my phone, and Google Home in front of my family, and I said, can someone tell me what the weather is going to be tomorrow? My youngest one was the fastest. She just said, hey Google, tell me what the weather is tomorrow. She wasn't even bothered enough to go open up a browser, go to Google Home, and find anything, right? So but that's the technology. So where are we today, right? So we are at what we call, the last decade was all about mobile apps, right? And for me, I find it sometimes strange saying that, like mobile apps are almost dead, right? And we all almost just grew up with, hey, there's an app for this and there's an app for that, right? But we're coming into a post-app era where the first generation is about new platforms that enable chatbots and messaging, and we're here to talk a lot about chatbots and messaging as apps move to the cloud. The next one is, as we learn more about this, a lot of you folks that I mingle in the crowd talked about, so where do chatbots go? And they really become your private assistants, right? So we have virtual private assistants today. We know them by Google Home and Dot and Echo and the likes. But the idea is that you can orchestrate across multiple devices. We're getting into this world, as Robert Skoll calls, the mixed reality world, where augmented and virtual reality sort of starts bringing the physical and the digital worlds together. And of course, we have headless applications with IoT and the like. So sort of this is where the new reality is headed. And I mentioned sort of Robert, and it's a really good book, The Fourth Transformation, where he talks about it's not really augmented or virtual reality. He talks about the world being a mixed reality world, where it's going to be very hard to know sort of what is real and what is not. I mean, for those who saw Minority Report and all that, beam me up, Scotty. It is getting real there, right? Where we are beginning to look at that. I saw an app, not an app, but a demonstration on a company that I was very interested in, where literally the doctor is sitting somewhere in the other side of the room and operating on a patient just by wearing a glove and actually doing that remotely. And we've done remote robotics, yes, but this is actually, being able to do this completely remotely was pretty cool. So what does this all lead us to, right? So where we are, so we call this the ambient user experience. This is really all about making sure we have the best user experience. And one of the mistakes a lot of folks do is they think about this in silos. I'm going to build a mobile app, or I'm going to build a chatbot, or I'm going to build something else. You can't think about this that way anymore. It all comes down to sometimes mood. I mean, you're sitting there in your living room with all the devices. You could very well be on your laptop, but you pick up your mobile phone and start doing something with it. Why? You can't explain it. It's just emotion, right? And so you've got to think about, how do you deliver your experiences, in a very contextual way, regardless of where you are, personalized for yourself. It's no longer a case of cohort behaviors. In other words, I'm going to build an app for this group of people. No, it's you individually. It's Chad, it's Richard, it's Jeff. I'm going to build for you personally, otherwise you're just going to leave and go to some other brand, right? So it's personalized for each behavior across this dynamic device mesh. So the other day in Spain, we finally installed a chatbot on a Mercedes, and I was running Android car or Android Auto. Is that the right one? Yeah. And so the executives of this bank are doing their banking as they're driving now, right? And one of the things that they really like is that as they were going through the transaction, and this really happened, so this person was doing a loan form application on the car. They were talking to the bot and they're sort of driving and they didn't start the loan processing, they were sort of asking questions about, what's the current interest rate? If I do 20 years, what's my payment, and so on and so forth. And they got to their office. They went to their office, they picked up the mobile device, and there was a notification that said, hey, you want to continue from where you left? And that's the blended experience I talk about. It's no longer a case of, I'm just going to build a silo and everything happens within that silo, right? So how do we get there, right? So this is all about, where we see the next decade of everything happening is around the world of conversational interfaces that's really going to replace sort of this most common interfaces that we have. So conversational AI first. And to a certain extent, as we think about this in the meetup, chatbots is an example of conversational AI. Conversational AI is much more than that. You've got to think about all cognitive skills. Computers haven't yet figured out how to smell, but other than that, pretty much everything. Image processing, to video processing, to speech, to, of course, your text via the messaging channels, right? So all of them then now start contributing towards sort of this new next decade of conversational AI first. Okay, so how do we get there? So what do we do in the Oracle Mobile Cloud that allows us to get there? So, our whole area, and I'll sort of take the next slide, is our focus is not just to build a chatbot, is to build these ambient human interfaces. And it's about two components. One is that a dev platform that allows you to build this multi-channel experiences, starting with the mobile device, the wearables, to messaging chatbots, to speech, to augmented reality. So that is one, being able to build these interfaces across multiple channels. So that's one. The other important aspect is to be able to grab insights into usage. And I use the word very carefully here. It's not analytics. For me, the word analytics typically means an event that's already occurred, right? Yeah, you can go and analyze and you can make actions based on that. But insights is all about what is going on right now and how are your customers, whether it's your employees or your consumers, interacting with you in real time. And how are they doing it? What channel are they coming through? What kind of use cases are they asking? And so you can start deriving these components and be responsive to it. So for example, again, this is the behavior I've seen with my kids. The one thing that mobile has done has made us very impatient, right? If you have a mobile app and it goes, what's the next thing you do? You switch it off and you're likely to delete it, right? What happens if you go to a chatbot and chatbot says, uh-oh, I'm not sure what you're asking about. You're not probably going to ask another question, right? So how do you make sure that that user at that very moment of time, who's pretty upset about sort of the experience, comes back to you? That's insights, right? If you immediately get an alert, it's good to see everything going green. I mean, this is one thing I love when I go to see, I used to be in network operations and all that, right? You go to a big data center, everything's green, 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 green. But with this, you want to see reds. Not that, when I say mean red is, you don't want to lose customers, right? If something goes wrong, you want to be able to jump on it right away, so you can go back to that customer and say, I'm sorry, you're asking this question, I'm going to route to a human agent because the chatbot didn't figure it out. Or your mobile app was running slow because our API was something wrong with the API, and here's sort of some compensation for you, right? So that is what it's about, what we call multi-channel user insights, being able to really get deeper insights into usage, adoption, so you can take action based on that. Now, of course, you're mining all this data, so you can do interesting things to determine, hey, let's look at the journey of a user. Did they start on the web? When did they go to the mobile device? Did they ever use a chatbot? So you can actually start doing some very interesting after the fact analytics as well. But really the goal is how do you do deep insights into the usage and operations of these. So for that, what you really need, and the analysts are now beginning to call this out. For example, Gartner calls this the MXDP, which is the Multi-Channel Experience Development Platform. Forrester calls it the DXDP, which is the Digital Experience Platform. But basically, the fact is that when the world has evolved, you started with mobile services, you've added sort of bots, you've added augmented reality, and you've added analytics. So this is sort of what, as you think about, I know this topic is about chatbots, but I wanted to have you guys think it a little bit broader, because chatbots get manifested anywhere, right? So think about this, right? I'll give you an example of cars, but even the mobile app itself, right? Imagine that you have a mobile app where you have a chatbot built into the mobile app, right? That's one way to weave people out of the application into the chatbots. What do you think is going to happen when you're going to go into augmented reality, or you're going to cover your faces, right, with virtual reality? You're going to be talking to it. You're not going to be typing to anything, right? So that's all about, again, chatbots, right, on how they interact with each other. So as you look across the multi-channel plethora, the bots become very critical. Right. Now, here's one challenge that a lot of bot platforms have, right? If you look at sort of all the bot platforms out in the market, and I know that Chad has used quite a bit of that, they run into one problem, which is every one of them are siloed to build a chatbot, right? So I'm going to build a great chatbot, and maybe you build the best chatbot. But one fundamental thing is, how do you do bot-initiated conversations across Alexa, across Facebook, across Kik, Skype, Line, Telegram, and so on and so forth? You need to have the ability to do push notifications. How many here have built mobile apps? Right? That was generation one of what we did for user experiences. Push was a common thing you did. You built a mobile app and you didn't add push, that mobile app wasn't mobile really, right? It was all, you need to have an event-driven system. So the fact that you have mobile services that can do push is you can use them across multiple channels, right? How many of you here are building augmented reality? Anyone? Right? So in augmented reality, what is the hardest part? Hardest part is, how do I identify this bottle and then do some augmented stuff on top of this bottle, right? So and now augmented reality isn't new. I mean, there have been companies like Vuforia and Wikitude, and now Apple with AR Core and AR Kit, they're all coming into life. But if I wanted to understand this bottle, this is what I need to do today. I need to have a marker, like a page like this. I want to put this bottle on top, and I'm going to take a video of this like a few times, right? And then say that this is actually a bottle. And when you see this in good light and all that, now you can put augmented stuff on top of that. That's how today's augmented reality works. But if I decide to just break this bottle and squash it, it's not going to work again, because it needs an exact size in the video, right? This is where AI comes into play with image recognition and object recognition that again gets used across. This is where I talk about the conversational AI platform, is that image recognition being an API of cognitive skills can be used across multiple types of use cases. But so don't restrict yourself to just think chatbot as you knew it today, which is ask a question, what a response. Yes, that is important. But think beyond that to have this cross multiple platform and experiences. Okay, so with that, what I thought I'd do is I'll give you some examples. I'm going to sort of hide behind the desk here, and I'm going to give some examples of some bots. You've seen some of it, but I wanted to highlight a few things as you think about building bots and give you some best practices as that comes up. Right. So here's my sort of a device. I've got all my channels here, and I'm going to take Facebook Messenger here. I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. So I'm going to start with sort of my banking bot, and I'm not going to go through this because you've seen a lot of bots. I just want to give you an idea of how to think about this bot, right? You guys see it? No, you don't see it. Yes. So I'm going to start like everything else. I'm going to ask a standard question like, what's my balance? And hopefully I'm connected. Yeah, it all works good. So here, the way I've designed the dialogue. So one of the most important things is to make sure that you're creating the right dialogue in the conversation with the user, right? So this basically says, okay, which account do you want your balance for? I say my checking account, and gives me some number, right? And if I know on the other hand, I ask, what's my checking balance, right? I won't see the menu anymore, and I basically get that, right? So pretty straightforward. The idea is that as you go through this is to minimize the amount of typing you want the end user to do, right? So I can say, for example, show most recent purchases in my credit card. Okay. So then being able to take this and put it into a carousel where you can have some pretty pictures and the likes, right? So minimize the amount of input that the end user has to do, right? Now, some of the things to think about, and this is sort of where the platform becomes very important. It's not a case of writing code here, right? And let me explain. And so, you guys understand what non sequiturs are in the chatbot world? So let me give you an example of a non sequitur here, right? So let's say I want to be a good, son to my mother and say, send money to mom. Okay, it's Mother's Day, let's send her some money, right? So now, back to this dialogue, right? So the bot doesn't have all the information for me to send enough money to mom, right? So it says, which account do you want to make the payment from? So I'm going to say, okay, from checking. Now, it says, the normal dialogue is, what's the payment amount? So this is what we call a sequitur, or a very linear flow, which is what most of the bots do, right? But we as humans are anything but linear in our thinking, right? We sort of have different tangents, and I talk with my family and go into different tangents in my presentations. So here, if I come and say, well, how much do I have? Right, and I'm not going to say anything else. Two things to remember. One is memory and context and state, right? So this is why just having an NLU engine that does this isn't enough. You have to think about the dialogue, the state, and how you create the flow, right? So here, you realize that, I picked up checking earlier, and I've changed the context to, Australia is probably. Yeah, it's time they woke up. It's actually a Friday there, and basically, it sort of switched context and gave me this number. I would say, well, actually, I was supposed to have $10,000 in my bank. What were my last transactions? And just forget to send money to mom and finish my transaction, right? So what happens is, this is where memory comes in. So if I just come in and say, send, remember sort of where I stopped. What's the payment amount? And let's see, we put $100 to mom. I didn't repeat anything. It says your payment has been. You basically, the bot automatically recognizes the fact that, hey, it's time to collect some structured data. The conversational UI is not the best paradigm to collect this information. So it gives me a link, and in line with my chat window comes up an instant app. And this instant app is built courtesy of a company that is, Phil, where are you? You're here. A mile down, this way, that way, somewhere. That way. I'm not to confuse everybody, it's called Chatbox, B-O-X. Okay? A chatbot and a chatbox. So that 10 times, and after a year, it'll be funny. So basically what this does is now it pops up this instant app in line with my chatbot. So if you want to continue, yeah, I'm going to continue. And this is the full process. So for example, I say I don't recognize this transaction, or I've been billed more than one for this, or I've been billed too much. If I hit submit dispute, then it says, okay, based on that, I'm going to pass this, where you can actually take a picture or a video of the receipt. So I just want to make sure that this is live. I'm not going to do this because it'll update and all that. So I'll say I don't have a receipt for it. And someone sent me a voicemail. Everything's happening. Picks up my information, I hit confirm, X out of it, and I'm back into the bot with this information, right? So this is very, very critical to have that kind of experience. And this experience could be common across everything. So even if you're using Alexa for that matter, right? And you say, I want to dispute a transaction, you're not going to sit there. What you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to send it to your mobile app, and just could be an SMS. You click on the SMS, and you can have the same exact experience. You finish it, and you go back to your system of record. Right? So think about incorporating, this is sort of what I call a blended experience. And one important thing is, some people say, well, but I've already got the mobile app, so why don't I do that, right? Your mobile app isn't just doing a dispute of a transaction. What does your mobile app do? Everything, right? This is what I would call a transactional app, which is just doing that particular business process. So think about how we went from a services architecture SOA to microservices, right? The same thing here. We're going from a monolithic app to micro apps that perform that particular function, right? And I'll show you some of the tools that we use to sort of build this as well, right? So the quick example of this blended experiences. The other chatbot I just wanted to show you very quickly was how we can use cognitive skills to go beyond just the simple text, right? Now, one of the things, let me see if I can do not disturb, right? Is, for those who have built bots, right, there are sort of two types of bots that we see mainly today. We see what we call transactional bots, right? So this is where the data is dynamic, you're asking questions about your balance, you're doing stuff, and it's going back to a system of record, and you're getting information back. But many companies today, to dip their toe in the water, are starting with what they call informational bots, right? So where most companies have an FAQ of some sort, right? Either on the website or some knowledge repository. So being able to sort of also transpose those two together. So I'll show you some examples of all that stuff. So the use case here, before you start judging me, is that the use case here is meant to be for a female. So you see dresses that's got nothing to do with me. Just putting a disclaimer up front. Although there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. For those who watch Roseanne, you might see what that means. Did anyone watch Roseanne in the last episode? No, you guys are too young to know that. Right. So here the use case here is that there's this lady who is going to China for her friend's wedding and wants to buy a dress and get it shipped to China, right? And she's too busy, so she uses a chatbot. And so she comes and says, do you ship to China? So first, this is basically what we call a Q&A bot, or a question and answer bot, where the question asked isn't exactly what is on their FAQ, right? Their FAQ says, do we ship billing international orders, right? And this is again where we transpose natural language processing, and underneath the covers we use things like Elastic Engine, right? Where we can still do search, but that search is not quite exactly what the input was. Right? The input was more, do you ship to China? And so we do the translation, this is okay, China equals international, what else can I find, right? And then this is sort of where the context comes in as well, where I can come and say, how long does it take to ship? I'm not going to say to China. I'm just going to say how long does it take to ship. And basically what it found was it matched that to international orders being shipped and how long does that take. Okay? So now that I know that my dresses can be shipped to China, I'll first ask by saying, okay, going to a wedding, inspire me. Right? So this is sort of what I meant. Don't judge me. This is not what I meant when a wedding. So this is sort of kind of so we basically found a match, and we trained our AI model with images and so on and so forth. This is just a recommendation engine. Nothing drastically AI about this. People have been doing recommendations for quite a while. So if I pick this sort of multicolored maxi dress, it'll go and find similar dresses that sort of match that sort of floral pattern. Again, it's just doing a vector of those dresses. But here where it gets interesting. So I say, I don't like any of these. I don't like these. So here, it can basically say, I'm not sure I understand what you want, but do you have like a picture or an image of something that you want to check? So I just happen to have a picture of Anne Hathaway and Meryl Streep in my right? And so this actually is now going to our servers, so this is running some real heavy NVIDIA GPUs where it's actually doing image processing. So what it's trying to do is break that image into different parts, identify what dresses are, whatever it can see that is, and it basically does a match against that and it finds a few other dresses. Right? So now we're back to sort of the process. So let's say I'm interested in this Ralph Lauren, so I hit buy. And now what I want to do is have a buy process. This is where again we initiate an instant app to do a buy. Why do I do that? Because now automatically, because it's a process, and I also want to do payments. I don't want my payments to go through Facebook. You've all heard what's happened recently. Enough said. So I don't want to go to, this is sort of the Eastlake Avenue address. I'm going to pick a new address. I'm going to say, well, let's ship it to the Marriott in Beijing. And it basically uses the device capabilities to do a geolocation, I confirm, and I hit X out of it, and there's my purchase order, right? So I can ask some standard questions like order status in multiple languages, but I'll just do English right now, and hopefully the order will be delivered by tomorrow. Okay? Now, so this is sort of the buying process. So let's look at the return process now, right? So one of the things I wanted to show you here is, again, as you sort of mix this, the informational bots and the transactional bots, right? For your bots to be able to disambiguate. So here's a question I'm going to ask. Can I return an item? Okay? I'm going to stop it. Before I hit return, enter, I'm going to stop here for a second. Now, when I go return items wherever I buy stuff, I go and say, here's something I bought, I want to return it. Right? My wife, on the other hand, is very polite. She'll go and say, can I return this item? What she really means is she wants to return the item, but she'll ask it as a question. Right? She wants to be very polite. I guess, right? So when we do this, and it works perfectly with my wife, it says, well, what do you actually want to do? You actually want to do the return, or do you have a question about returns, right? So if I say I have a question about returns, it says, okay, there's a whole bunch of things. Again, how to make a return to the returns processing center, international orders, and so on and so forth, right? On the other hand, if it's me, I'll just come and say, let's ask the same question again. Can I return an item? And this time around, I meant to review that. Right, so here's sort of coming from Bed Bath & Beyond, this is who we use. Then I say, can I return an item? Right, and I hit returns now. Up pops up another link. Here's my process for returns now. I get started, I can scan a barcode image, but I won't do this now. I'll just enter a number. Next. Right. Again, this is has full process. So for example, if I click on damaged items, it asks me to take a photo. If I say it's an improper fit, it hides it. Hit submit. Returns gives me the UPS number. I can sort of define my survey, rate the service, and X out of it, and here's my return, right? And this is sort of the blended experience that I talked about in chatbots that we need to have, right? So how do we put all this together, right? So this is sort of, I'll quickly sort of just walk you through our platform, and the session has timed up, so hopefully we can get back in.
Are any of these bots live?
Yeah, these are all pretty live bots.
So
But they're sort of taken by the brand and put their brand on top of it.
in order to get that seamless experience, has Oracle entered into agreements with banks and credit card companies and whatever that clothing store was?
Yeah, so that's the beauty, right? So in terms of payments, right? This is where we use instant apps. So rather than get the payment through directly through Facebook Messenger or Alexa, whatever it is, the payment happens through the instant app, right? When we launched the instant app is directly connected to the enterprise. We are bypassing all the messaging services, so none of the data is going to Facebook or to Skype or whoever else, right?
You have to get access to your data and your account in order to answer those questions.
Correct.
So how are you getting that data?
Right, so let's quickly talk about that, right? So there are 4 components to, I'll just leave this open like this, the way it takes a while to switch back. Right? So there are 4 pieces to the sort of the chatbot platform, right? So one is your channel configurator that pretty much abstracts out how you integrate with all these channels, right? Now, each of these channels, for those who build channel chatbots, right? Each of these channels have a different way on how you integrate. Although you can integrate via webhooks, which is pretty straightforward, but each of these channels have a different way of doing error logging and retries and the likes, right? And of course, the UI is different, so we have a whole bunch of that. The next part is the dialogue flow execution, which is sort of what I talked about there, which is the state engine, and the full conversational AI platform that breaks into all the NLUs, and we use a multitude of algorithms, both linguistic-based and DNNs and RNNs and stuff like that within that. And this is sort of to answer your question, what we do is we provide the full data integration capabilities right there, right? So this is typically used by an enterprise, right? Like a bank or a retailer. And what they do is sort of from here, we integrate into their systems of record, right, via our services. Now, if you as a consumer come in, what we do is there are 2 ways we authenticate. One is we authenticate via what we call 3-legged auth, right? So you log in via Facebook credentials, for example, and if there's anything critical where I need your personal data meaning data that's in the retailer or the bank, we then pop up the identity provider for that bank in line with the app, right? And then we do a callback with an OAuth token. So as soon as you log in, the bank gives me the OAuth token, and now I disintermediate the Facebook and everybody else, right? So that's how I can send information. Now when we store it, we do a PII in which none of your personal information is stored in the conversation logs, but we use the conversation logs to self-train the bot on things that you may have asked that we don't know in the corpus of data. Right? So that's one. The other thing we also do is do single sign-on federation. So let's say the bank uses some identity provider. We can go to the identity provider, get that token from them, and then pass that token to the bot, and the bot will do it on your behalf to the backend. So there are multiple ways to do that. But security is very critical, and this is sort of why, while Alexa is slowly coming in, but it's very hard to put that in the enterprise. That you don't want people listening into your conversations, and B, how do you handle the single sign-on tokens and so on and so on. It becomes really difficult.
And when you say you store data on the premises of an enterprise company, or actually
It's whatever conversations you have with the bot, we store.
But when you say we store, did Oracle store somewhere on?
No, Oracle doesn't store anything. Sorry, my apologies. We store on behalf of the customer because it's a cloud product, right?
So it would be the customer's account.
Correct. Only the customer has access to the logs, but because we are storing end user information,
Right.
we basically do a PI on that, and we remove any critical or any sensitive information.
Another quick question.
Yes, please.
So the enterprises, you work probably with hundreds, thousands of them, right? They are really not easy to manipulate, let's say their payment system.
Mm-hmm.
It can take, years,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
For them to alter it to something like this. how do you go about?
Great question. So that's what we do is we just use that payment system. So what the instant apps allow us to do is we basically just pass all the information to that payment system, and we say we don't want to do anything to do with your payment, because if I do, then I need to get into PCI compliance and all that stuff, and I don't want to store any of that information. So when you look at an instant app, that instant app data is bound directly to their data source, right? And that's the beauty of disintermediating all these other channels, where any information that whether it's personal or payment goes directly to the system of records or the bank.
Is it some sort of like unique way how you integrate with, let's say, enterprise has SAP, right?
Yeah.
That where they're dealing with the shipment, the
Correct.
payment, and everything. So there will be integration of this app with the SAP or something
Correct,
like that.
correct. So applications like SAP or Oracle or Workday or Salesforce, right? There are systems of record that sort of sit behind somewhere here, right?
Okay.
Now things like payment is done by payment gateways, right? So they're typically cloud providers, but they're their own PCI compliant cloud, right? So one is, so what this allows us to do is mash up data to go to multiple places, right? So we can mash up an API and say, I've taken an order, right? What does that order contain? Order contains items that I need to send to SAP, and it also contains payment information that I need to send to this gateway. So what happens is, once I collect in the chatbot, I've moved the channel out because it's not going through the channel. And I say, okay, now all this data, it comes to us, and we say, oh, payment information, I don't want to deal with it. Let's call this API and hand it over to them. Anything to do with SAP, we hand it to SAP and we log all that information.
Very impressive. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Generation of model. But a lot of these chatbots are user initiated, right? So we ask a question, the chatbot responds, and you have a conversation. What is coming very soon is this bot initiated and blended experiences, right? So I'll give you an example of one pretty cool one we're working on. I can't tell you the retailer for name of the retailer for this, which is sort of, retailers do want you to come to their store, right? What Amazon has tried to sort of do the opposite, but Amazon has their own stores now. People still want to go into the store. One of the biggest problems you go into the store is, where do you find something, right? So with the chatbot, you can actually ask a question, where do I find something? And you can actually have indoor navigation via augmented reality in the chatbot itself, right? So that is another example of blended experiences, right? The third is where we go into the world of headless, or process bots and virtual assistants. So let me give you an example of this. So the idea with headless bots is that there's this bot that's listening to you, or listening to things that you define around you, and is looking for events, and has got domain expertise on certain things. So for example, many companies have recruitment applications, right? Where, and then they have places where, like, for example, if someone has given you a recommendation of, or if your friend has given you a recommendation of their friend, and they get a job, then your friend gets a payment, right? Referral payment for that, right? But usually when I get an email like that, it's buried among 1,000 things to do, and I find it very hard to sort of go open the recruitment page, go create a new record, copy paste the resume, and it takes forever, right? So long story short, imagine that the bot was just listening to this event and said, oh, there's a recruitment thing, pick it up, and automatically creates a record in the recruitment cloud, right? And can do a lot more, but let's just stop at that, right? Or do your expenses for you. For those who travel, that would be huge, right? So the idea is that the next level is really it's not meant to be a virtual, I forgot the L there, it's meant to be a virtual assistant, right? So with that, what I would encourage you is come and experiment with us. We'll take your ideas and build them on the Oracle Cloud.
Script to do it in a specific path.
Yeah.
But it requires a lot of training for it to actually accommodate deviations. So what's your advice on, okay, how do we design the workflow in such a way that it could accommodate, and without much of a training, how do you really adopt?
That's a great question. So but two things to training, right? The first is the training models should not be on the flow. It should be more on the corpus of understanding the language, right? Flow is something you control. Now, that is why sort of when you think about building a bot, you should look at a tool that has the dialog flow built into it that can handle those things like non sequiturs, because you can code for every possible permutation combination of what the user is going to ask, right? So two things there. One is to be able to understand, so for example, like the example I gave you, or let me give this example, right? I want to order a cheese pizza, right? So it says, okay, what crust do you want, right? And I said, you take credit cards, right? What is the bot supposed to do? It'll keep saying, what crust do you want? I want to know how you're going to take payment. What crust do you want, right? So this is where the bot platform should be smart enough to know that you've now immediately moved to a different intent, right? So a good platform would give you that sort of state transition where if you're moving from one intent to the other, you're holding the state, you're holding the context. And so that was the same example I gave with send money to mom, right? So if you're not doing that, then it's a bad bot, right? And that's sort of why you have to really think through how you're going to design a dialogue, right? That's one. But even having said that, you're not going to be able to cover all those cases. So one of the things I always say is figure out how you're going to do human agent handoff. The first thing I tell my customers is the bot is not human. And don't insult the end user thinking this is a human. Let the end user know you're talking to a bot, and make sure that you do human agent handoff. Now we think about three cases of what happens, right? Number one is the user that says, I want to talk to a human agent. That's straightforward, you pass it to a human agent. Second thing is the bot basically says, uh-oh, I don't know how to respond to you. And we usually pick that up and say, I don't know how to answer your question, but I'm finding a human agent who can. Right? You don't want to just say, uh-oh, I don't know what to do to you, right? And the third thing is, when the bot does respond, but it responds with the wrong answer. It happens, right? There are some statements that are very, very, I mean, this is, at the end of the day, we're dealing with vectors and, you know, it could get into problems. Human behavior is that they'll typically repeat the question if the answer is wrong, right? So we pick that up and say, okay, oh, and I understood that we haven't been able to respond to the user, so let's take the second cue and pass it to a human agent. So what I would say is a combination of both two. Human agent is very critical and part of the overall solution. Thank you. Sure.
The fourth transformation, that's one of my favorite books from last year. So in terms of the Gen 2 bots that you're talking about, do those, I don't know how far the industry is in those really one, but do those take real-time data from the person's behavior in the app and can then transmit to make suggestions to them?
Absolutely. So, so that is sort of what we're actually working on, and I'll give you a use case of what we're doing there. So our president, Thomas Kurian, gets something like over 200, 300 approvals a day. Okay, at Oracle, if you want to buy a pencil, it actually goes to him, right? So he gets all these approvals, and about 70% of them, he doesn't even bother. His admin even doesn't bother to look at. It's like approve. But if I suddenly said, I need to promote someone to a VP, it gets flagged and he wants to know, okay, why does this guy need to be a VP or change their package, etc., right? So what we're doing is we're putting the bot there, which is this headless bot, that's just sitting there looking at what is the user's behavior, right? Or for example, you wake up every morning and you check your bank balance, right? So instead of that, it says, okay, you know, instead of you saying, hey, Alexa, what my bank balance is, you might try and say, hey, your bank balance is this much this morning. What else do you want to do, right? So that's sort of where we see that pattern changing, and that is really becoming an assistant for you. So that is happening very quickly now. And the reason it's sort of natural is because you still need that conversational logs to sort of say, what is that pattern of people doing that? And that's where you need to start getting, so one of the topics or areas to sort of look into more is what are called transfer learning. So those who have done AI, AI has always been built on, okay, I have a model, I'm going to take some TensorFlow or Jupyter notebooks or whatever, and I'm going to train the heck out of it by giving it data, right? But what does it tell you? That's about training data. For example, when I did that image recognition, I took data from Nordstrom and Macy's and I ran it through our algorithms. But then I pointed a photo of a boat, it wouldn't know what to do with it, right? So how do I make it learn about a boat without sort of sitting through and sifting through all these algorithms? So there's this new technology, I wouldn't say it's new, but it's getting more prominent, called transfer learning, where you can take the learnings of one model and apply it to the other. And that's where cross-domains become very important, especially when you're doing headless bots. So an example would be, I travel, I get an email from Uber after I've finished my Uber, I go to a restaurant, I take a picture, right? And I upload my picture, typically it goes to iPhoto, right? Now, if I was able to recognize those two and put them together and put it into my expense, now I've cross-trained the domains for that. Ryan. So Ryan's been putting his hand
Yeah,
up.
I was wondering, you mentioned in your first answer and your second answer how you've gained insight into maybe how the conversation flows, or maybe the person is asking about a certain thing and then they switch to a whole different type of conversation. Does that feed back into any sort of insight to your design team? Like, hey, there's a little junction here, look at that.
So I'll just very quickly show you one of the things we do quite a bit over here, or whatever. So insights become very critical to close the loop with that. Like that.
So the way I understand what you're describing is you're going to be supporting these instant app developers to create this completely seamless experience, but a lot of these instant apps are going to require artificial intelligence created by data and algorithms using the supervised data. How are you going to support these developers, these data scientists, with data accessibility, data acquisitions, maybe a data ecosystem? Because, for example, my stuff, I had to scrape it from the web, generate my own data set from scratch. And not a lot of people have that skill set or an idea of where they can even do that.
So it's a great question, right? So data is always a problem in the modeling, right? As I was telling someone, I did my master's in AI in '94 and didn't use it until 2016, right? The reason was twofold. I didn't have enough compute power and I didn't have enough data, right? So there is enough data, right? So to figure out, like for example, the simplest way you can train your NLP model, Wikipedia. You want to do sentiments, IMDb. Enough said, right? All open, you don't have to go look for it much, right? And that's why transfer learning makes a lot of difference. But your point on instant apps. So today the first phase of instant apps is you go develop it yourself. So rather than go build a full monolithic app, it's a simple zero code, drag and drop. We didn't have time to show it today, but you can just go to the chatbox.com and build it, right? But that is sort of the goal of where we're taking it. So for example, if I start, let's say that I want to fill a form for time capture, right? If I know from the chat what I'm doing, I don't have to build that app first. AI can build the app for me and surface it up, and we can store it as a template, right? So that's sort of where AI is going to be used, and Phil is going to be building that soon for us.
So you'll be relying heavily on transfer learning for a lot of your stuff.
Yeah, but that's the only way the industry is going to scale.
Yeah, it's the only way to scale. I use transfer learning for my stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you do when you've got a room full of people that are talking to their apps and they're talking over each other? I mean, how do you think about that problem?
When they're talking to their app,
noisy
there are
room.
a bunch of people that are trying to have a conversation with their device.
Yeah.
And they're all saying, okay, Google. Or they're all saying, hey, Siri. Or they're all cringing when anyone brings up Alexa's name.
Yeah.
How do you think about that when you've got an office that's full of people that are trying to interact?
Yeah, good question. That's why there's someone to take off in the office. And it was interesting. I mean, I'm glad you brought this. Yesterday I was on a call with the CIO of a company, and it was going on and on and on about Alexa. So I just stopped him for a second and I said, first, I understand that $39 each, the dot, right? So you have 90,000 employees. You're going to buy that for everyone? So he was like, yeah, maybe. And I said, hey, describe your building for me. He goes, what? You describe your office for me. Oh, we got 8 floors. And I said, you sit in a very plushy office, right? I said, where do the rest of your employees sit? Oh, they're in cubicles and that. And I said, imagine, I said, hey Alexa, how many Alexas are going to wake up? Right. So they haven't thought through all of this, right? So for that, right, my recommendation is, and we didn't have time to do this, is you take a mobile app, and what do you have? You've got Siri on your iOS, your Google Voice. You can just use that, right? The beauty about that is you can define how the response is. The response can be text, or you can talk to it, right? It doesn't have to be speech back to you. The other one is Cisco. Cisco's doing pretty cool things with Cisco Spark, where the phone, right? You know how you have the big Cisco IP phones, right? They're actually embedding bots within that itself. So you know how you can press one to transfer a phone to somebody else? You can press that and say, hey, what's my vacation balance? Right? So that can either come up with a display or it can speak to you, and that's low volume. Yeah?
So do you think over time humans are going to modify themselves to react to bots, or are bots going to adapt themselves to humans?
I think it'll be more the former humans to bots. Because my view is, because I've broken every bot I've played with, right? Because I know I can ask questions that nobody can fix it. A simple thing to check is ask 2 intents in one statement and everyone falls apart. right? Because NLUs haven't been designed, but we can go on and on about, we can go on and on about a sentence, which is a paragraph. No NLU, I mean, other than unstructured data, but a bot can't handle that yet.
Yeah, that was I agree, and the crux of the question was basically because are we kind of going down the wrong path in some sense by trying to be too conversational or act too human and basically wind up not satisfying the human user at the end of the day. Whereas maybe just having a very quick in and out conversation or in and out request is the actual way.
Right, and that's why sort of when I talk to customers, I say make it very simple in terms of reducing your load on your customer service first. Make it simple, make sure that end user knows what the bot is capable of doing. And that's why the first thing I always tell people is, as soon as they type hi, you start by saying, this is what the bot can do, right? And give some samples. Otherwise, the experience is it's like any other mobile app, right? If it's crap, people are going to delete it. Yeah.
What's your view around security? So, I mean, regarding like enterprise stuff, you're talking to a bot,
yeah.
You order something and there is my buddy or someone else just orders the same stuff,
yeah.
Different address. How do you address it?
But
around voice conversation.
On a voice conversation, so there are a couple of techniques for that. So Google has done a good job of that. So I don't know if you've checked Google Home in terms of voice, where it actually recognizes the voice and does biometrics on voice. So for example, in Google Home, my daughter would go and say, call mom, and it will call my wife. If I say it says your mother has passed away, right? So it is aware of sort of that, right? So from there you can actually do that. But the other way to do that is sort of when you do that, we always implement a two-factor authentication from that. So at that point it says text you a number and says I don't say a secret word or something, but you have to implement that. Unless it's your own private device. Yeah.
I actually want to expand the question on security and privacy.
Yeah.
So to those who build bots, there are so many bot platforms. There are so many platforms where you can implement those bots, right? You just show especially Facebook Messenger account, not mistaken, right? So then if you want to add analytics to it, right now all bot platforms have superb analytics to it. So there is companies that actually provide fantastic analytics for bot platforms. So it's a separate entities. How do you address the problem that all of these companies actually try to keep the data
themselves
on their, exactly, they have a bunch of privacy policies where it says, I will own
this is why Mark has been in front of Congress now.
Exactly, yeah, so this is for enterprise solutions. This is a challenge I don't know how to solve right now.
It's a very good question. So I spent a lot of time with Facebook, and last time they sent me an email to send to my customers saying, we actually do not store your data.
This is what they said.
That's what they told me.
I spent a lot of time with them too.
And this is what happened to Zuckerberg later, right?
Yeah.
So yes, that is an issue, and so there is no straightforward answer to it. The complicated answer is that for anything that's critical, PI or SII, is to bypass them, right? And in one of two ways, right? Either use a channel that is not public. So for example, Slack or HipChat and those things, right? Or Microsoft Teams, Skype for Business, or use instant apps, right? Where the data, so you still use a chatbot for most of the things, but when it's critical, you sort of get off it. They say they don't store it, but I'm sure.
Yeah.
Here's what they said to me: they store it, but they don't look into it. Okay.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yeah, they don't look at it, but they give it to somebody else to look at it.
Right, but then we understand how we look at it, right?
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, if you go into details.
Yeah, and same thing with any. I mean, see, and it's sort of a catch-22, right? So a lot of our enterprises say, Oracle stores the data, and I said, yes, Oracle stores the data, but we don't authorize anybody to look at the data, right? But we want to be able to take that to train our model. So it's a catch-22, right? So how do you get AI better? You have more data, but I can't get to your data because you're not allowed to use it. Right? So one of the consortiums I'm trying to get is our customers to talk to each other to give us the data so we can train our models. Anyway, I know it's right. Go ahead. One last question.
I have a question about the context switch.
Yeah.
So how many contacts you can handle? Is there a limit?
There isn't really any. I mean, it really comes down to the memory footprint of the server. But again, being a cloud, you're scaling automatically, right? So it's functions based. So you can automatically scale based on the number of context switches you're doing.
And another question is, how long is the contact So say if I switch to another contact and I forgot an earlier contact.
So we keep the last, we keep the last, so we keep all your conversations, and from on the state perspective, we just point to the last state that you had in your logs, right? So if you come back the next day, we say, was it a completed conversation or not, and then remind you that it wasn't completed.
So for the example you showed,
Yeah.
I want to send certain amount of money to my mom.
Yeah.
And I forgot to enter the amount, and then tomorrow when I suddenly remember, I can enter.
Correct. That's exactly how it works. Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be secure.
It's secure in the sense that it's stored in the enterprise's data store, right? So it's not like it's out living in Facebook or anybody else. It's stored in the conversation logs in the enterprise, right? So your history is completely stored. Now, your $100 is obfuscated at that point, right? Anything that's sensitive is not stored in the logs. It's the conversation stored, but not the details, right? So your name is not there, your mom's name is not there, mom is generic, right? The fact that you said $100 is not there after you've completed the transaction. Right, one more.
So, I have a question. Let's pretend 10 years from now, digital life totally doesn't need biological life, and it's really like smart and fast,
Like Terminator 2.
Yeah, so how do you morally reconcile how you've chosen to just work, knowing that inevitably, even if you're not good at your job, the millions of others who are good, amazing, will totally make AI, which doesn't need humans.
Yeah, progress is inevitable, right? The simple answer is if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, right? I've always firmly believed that humans are always smarter than machines, and then always figure out something else to do. If humans take over Earth, we'll be in Mars. That's
humans what?
If machines take over Earth,
yeah,
we'll be in Mars.
All right.
That's sort of where I see it. I was answering some question earlier. I said, where do you see yourself in 20 years? I said, if I'm alive, in Mars.
The delivery timeline of both of those might be incongruent.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you.
One thing before we all leave here, Suhas, as a token of our appreciation, we thought we would make you a bot of our own. Thanks to Thea and Christian here.
Wonderful.
Pretty handy with the 3D
Great.
printer.
Thank you.